All right, there is a folder out there with today's date on it. You don't have to go there right now. It's no big thing. But what I did was I found some resources that talk about form validation. Notice web form validation, web programming step by step. There's a thing on form validation. This looked like it was pretty good. Systems, programming and scripting, regular expressions in PHP. This is a PHP cheat sheet. Now I got to see how many of you laugh when I say this, because how do you pronounce that? How do you pronounce it? Pecker. It's pronounced Pecker. Usually when I say that I get at least one person to smile. All right, but it is a Pecker cheat sheet. And the key thing, this is kind of nice because it's only one page and it talks about a lot of the different things that you have in there with regular expression handling. All right, you're going to see several examples of preg match today. You're going to see some of the stuff that's in here. All right, some of it you'll see a lot, some of it you won't see that much. Good, bad, or indifferent, there's a lot of different ways here to do the same thing. All right, and what I typically did was I tried to find one that I thought was fairly simplistic, and I used that one. So there's a bunch of these in here. The other thing that I wanted to show you, and I know I have before, but I'm just going to show it again. And that is regularexpressions.info. But they have a thing in here. Notice there's a printable PDF. I don't know how big it is, but there's a printable PDF, and they also have a thing in here that talks about tools and languages, and there is a thing in here for someplace in here for PHP. There you go. Yes. Okay. It's probably a tester. Yeah, it is. So you can put your regular expression in there, and then, for instance, if I wanted to say this, starts with hello, all right, and if I put in here hello world, all right, notice one match. But if I remove that, 0 matches. All right. There's Regex Tester.com. There's a whole bunch of these. That's probably just as good as any of the other ones. All right. But the idea, and let me just show you the file and what I've changed on it as soon as I can find it to bring it up. No, it's not where I got it. It's because I'm not on the virtual desktop. There you go. All right. So the stuff that we worked on before, I added a little bit of stuff to it. I'm going to print this out for you again. But notice, again, all fields are required. I didn't realize this, but when I had the specs in here, I didn't have a spec that the Social Security number must be in that format. That was not in there originally as a comment. So I put that in. And so notice what I put in here. First name, 2 to 25 characters, alpha only. Means no spaces, no anything. Just characters. It can be uppercase, lowercase, it doesn't matter. Last name. This word starts getting a little bit hinky, for lack of better words, but I tried to come up with a generic pattern. And when you see in here, last name, 2 to 50 characters, will allow any alpha, or a hyphen, or an apostrophe, or blank spaces. Problem is, you can't have just blank spaces because we trim it at the beginning. Bless you. So, but right now, the way that this is set up, for example, I can put in there some goofy patterns and it'll take the way it currently exists. Address, 10 to 50 characters. Alpha will also allow apostrophes, hyphens, numbers, and blanks. Why? You know, the kind of stuff you normally have in an address. City, again, notice no apostrophes, but alpha, hyphens, and blank spaces only for a city name. All right. State, I used a drop-down list. There's no validation required the way it currently is. Zip code will take either one of these formats. It'll take either 5 numbers or 5 numbers, a hyphen, and 4 numbers. All right. Username, 6 to 8 characters, will not allow blanks. So it can be 6 to 8 of any kind of character, whatever you want. Email, as I wrote, typical email validation. Age, kind of thing we talked about last hour, with a range of 1 to 125. Phone number, I actually changed this. It just was getting too, the whole program itself is well over 300 lines now. So it's this format. Number, dash, number, dash, number format. All right. And birth date. Some of this stuff was a little testy just because of the fact that I'm not going to lie to you. It's like anything else. When you work with something and then you don't work with it for a while, and then you come back to it, you're like, I know I do it like this. And then you do it like that and it doesn't work. All right. So, you know, you can raise your hand now and say, yeah, welcome to my life. But I tried to go through this and put a bunch of stuff in here that I thought would at least help you. First of all, as it says here, notice, that's how you can create constants in PHP. You use the define keyword, and then in parentheses, all right, you put the name of the constant in single or double quotes, a comma, and then the value. All right. I could also, I'm not going to keep this in here, but it's not that it has to be numbers. So I could have said in here, hola, and then that could have been hello. That's legal, is what I'm saying. So when you create constants, they don't have to be numeric constants. It's just in this program, they all were. Now, there's a few things that I wanted to get across to you that I probably didn't do a great job of last time, so I'm going to do it right, or at least try to do it right now. That is, if I come in here, and I've got a simple PHP program, and I know I said some of this last time, but I want to make sure you understand this. So if I come in here, and I'm going to write a very, very simple PHP program right now. And I'm going to say $age equals 21. And then we'll say print. We could say echo too, it doesn't matter. But if we say this, your age is $age. All right, if we say that, that's literally, if we put it in there like that, that literally will print your age is $age. Because when you put things in single quotes like that, it doesn't go through a process that's called interpolation. In other words, it just thinks that's part of the string. So remember that when you're working with single quotes. So how do you get around that? Well, there's 2 ways. I can either say print, and I can say double quote here. Your age is $age, double quote. And then that will literally print out your age is 21. So that's fine. The other way that I can get around that is I can say print, and I can use either single or double quotes here, but I'll just use single just to show you. I can say your age is, now end the single quote, dot $age. That will also print this. And in fact, if I do this one more time, and I use double quotes here, so other than that first way right here, these will all work. But I want you to understand something, and that is when you can. Sometimes you'll have to have double quotes within single quotes or single quotes within double quotes. But if you have any control over it, use single quotes whenever possible. Because when you use double quotes, the thing has to look for interpolation. This, if I have a whole program full of this, that you see right there, it's going to end up taking longer than this will. Because the system has to go through the interpolation process, and then it has to figure out what kind of variable it is. Here it doesn't have to do that in either of these two. So even though it might look like a little bit more work, when possible, you should use single quotes. Now, did I break that rule? I'm sure in this program I did. But I'm talking about if you're creating an application program, especially one that is at least somewhat time sensitive. All right? But I just want to show you that because that's a bunch of different ways that you can do the same thing. But you notice that other than the first one, any of the other three here will work. All right? All right. That's why I used the single quotes there, because it will end up working faster. Now, the only time you use single quotes around a constant is when you declare it. Did everybody hear that? The only time you use single quotes or double quotes in a constant like this is when you declare it. Throughout the program, when I use it, it's just min age or it's max age. But what you're telling PHP is, hey, that string min age, when you see it, replace it with 1. That string max age, when you see it, replace it with 25. And again, this would work with either single or double quotes. All right, but the recommendation from Zend, who are the PHP gurus, is that you use single quotes when possible. I tried to do that again. I'm sure that there are times I screwed up and didn't. All right? All right. We looked a little bit at this last time, but again, I want to make sure you realize this. That if I've got a string that looks like this, all right, and instead of age, I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff. I'm going to write $, string, stupid name, equals, and I'm going to put inside a single quotes, space, 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 hello, space, space, space. All right? Literally now if I say print $, string, that's what it's going to print. It keeps everything that's within the quotes. Did everybody hear that? So that literally will print this. Space, 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 hello, space, space, space. If, when I print this, I say this, ltrim, and I put that in there like this, then instead of printing this, it'll remove all of the leading strings. So it'll print hello, but it'll still keep the trailing ones. Does that make sense? Again, it might sound real simplistic, but you have to understand this from the get-go. And if I do it again and I say print rtrim, $string, all right, from that original string that I had, this original one here, all right, that'll trim the ones at the end, but it'll keep all the other stuff. So that'll print basically that. It won't print the quotes, all right, so that'll print that, and it'll print that, and that. So if I want to get rid of all leading and trailing quotes, that's when I use print trim, $string. So again, in this case then, that's going to just print hello. All right? And you may or may not know it, but this does not exist in a lot of languages, such as JavaScript. There is no true trim. All right? But JavaScript has an ltrim and an rtrim, but it doesn't have a trim. I don't understand that. But literally what trim does is it does this. And I don't know the order, but what trim does is it does print, and I don't know if it does ltrim or rtrim first. It doesn't really matter. So it calls them both. So in other words, trim is an alias for calling ltrim and then rtrim, or else it's rtrim and then ltrim. All right? Again, this stuff might sound really basic, but I want to make sure, you know, as we go through this, that at least you've heard it. So again, remember that all these variables, all these names here, $post, boom, boom, everything that you see right there, all that stuff is what we had in here. It's all this stuff. All right, now I've added to it, I put some placeholders and some other stuff. Don't worry about that right now. But the point is, so secnum, all right, is that silk secnum. And it's really important. One of the things I'm impressing upon the first year people in the 157 class, I don't know if Arinda did this or not, and if she didn't, it's nothing on her. She probably didn't know it. But when you set this stuff up, you should get used to setting up both a name property and an ID property. The ID property is what you use on the server side for JavaScript, for the get element by ID, etc. The name property is what you use so the ID is what you use on the client side. The name property is what you use on the server side. All right? And again, we said here at the beginning, someplace in here, the method is post, and that's why you see all the $ post and all those names. And I'm taking for granted that that makes sense to everybody. All right? Now, the difference between these two things is, again, the first one literally is just a string, and the second one is an array. Arrays in PHP work almost identically to arrays in JavaScript. In other words, you can create an array like this and not give it a size. All right, I could come back in my next line of code if I wanted to. I could have typed in $ error array, and I could have said 100 equals hello, and that would have been fine. Then it would have gone through error array 0 through 99, and it would have put the empty string in there. Does that make sense to people? Just like it does in JavaScript. All right, in most programming languages, and I know you probably aren't as familiar with this, man, but in most programming languages, there are what are called strongly typed. This is a loosely typed language. You don't have to say even what kind of variable you're putting in there. And just like in JavaScript, I can set up an array like this. So I can set up an array, and I can say, let's see, what do I want in there? I want true, and I want hello, and I want 126, etc. I can keep doing that. So I can mix data types within an array. Because, again, this is a loosely typed language, and that's why I'm allowed to do that. All right? Usually, when you create a brand new array, you'll see it created the way I showed it to you right there. All right? And if you start filling up the array, so let's assume for a second that I wanted to fill up that error array, and I just wanted to put in there 1, 2, 3, all right, as an example. But I wanted to fill it up a line at a time. Then you'll typically see it like this. Error array 1 equals 1. All right, that's usually how you see it filled up. Okay, just a couple things to kind of keep in mind. Now, we talked about this last time, but again, I want to say it because I'm trying to be complete here. There's a lot of ways that you can work with this. Empty is, to me, is one of the easier ways. All right, but you can use empty. You can use is set. You can check to see if so_sec_num equals double quote, or if it equals single quote, or there's some kind of a length property you can check on it to see if it's equal to 0. I try to be consistent here. So in other words, if any of these fields are empty, be they the social security number, first name, last name, etc., any of these fields that you see in here, if any of them are empty, what we're doing is we're adding both to our error string and to our array. All right, we're adding the same message. You'll notice that after error string it says dot equals. You use dot in PHP for concatenation. Not a plus sign like you use in most other languages. It's dot. So in other words, again, simple example, but sometimes they're the best. So if I say here, first equals Jeff, last equals Scott, and I want to concatenate those two together, whole equals $first dot $last. All right, and that literally, since I put no spaces in there, that's literally going to make that equal to this. All right. Not only that, just so you know, because you'll see this a lot in application code. Again, forgiving language, PHP could care less if you put no blank spaces in there whatsoever. I find that hard to read, and I think hard to debug. But the point is, whether you put the spaces in or whether you leave them off, it'll still work just fine. All right. So again, we're coming through, we're checking first name, we're checking last name, we're checking address, we're checking city, we're checking state, we're checking zip, username, email, age, phone, birth date. So what we're saying in English there is if you leave any of those things in there blank, It can be 1, it can be all the way up to a 12 or however many of them there are. I think there were 12 fields. You are now going to have a value in the error string, and you will have a value in the error array. Does that make sense to people? All right. So this stuff that's here is new. Go ahead. Yes. Yes. Question was, if you have this, and you just leave bracket, bracket, then it appends it on to the end of the array. Yeah. There's a lot of functions like you have in JavaScript, like there's push and pop and a bunch of other stuff. You can use those too. But this is just a shortcut. That's all. All right. What I tried to do here when I started going through the pattern matching is I was online, and a lot of them were Stack Overflows. There are some other ones also, but what I did on here, and again, you're going to get a hard copy of this as soon as I go upstairs and print it off, but I put the URL from where I found the stuff. All right. So again, the idea is to introduce you to this concept of pattern matching so you can see it. Again, just so you know, that stands for PHP, regular expression, match. And this is what you're looking for, and that's where you're looking for it. Does all that make sense? PHP, regular expression, match. All right? And this is the pattern that you're looking for, and that's the field in which you're looking for that pattern. All right? In English, what this says is you can sometimes get away without doing this, but the forward slashes that you see right here, they're delimiters. That says where the pattern begins and where the pattern ends. Does that make sense? A lot of times you can leave them off, but almost always you see them in here. And again, as I said to you before, I don't mean to keep belaboring the point. I could have done all this stuff in double quotes also. Would have worked just fine. All right? When you see something here that with a caret like that, that means starts with. When you see something with a $sign here, that means ends with. So in English, this says this pattern must start with 3 digits. They can be any digits between 0 and 9. Then followed by a hyphen, then followed by any 2 digits, 0 through 9, then followed by a hyphen, then followed by 4 digits, 0 through 9. Does that pattern make sense? And there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, just so you know. All right? No. But what this is saying is, just so you, the question was, do you need a $sign at the end? No, you don't need that, and you don't need that at the beginning either. But what this says is the only thing this will accept is number, 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 dash, number, number, dash, number, 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 number. If I left that off on the end, I could have put a valid thing in there, but I could have added at the end like hello, and it would have considered to be still valid. All right? Because what happens is it does what's called a greedy match. It'll match, and it'll keep going until it finds something that doesn't match. All right? So this is saying I only want to match this pattern, which has got 3, 4, 6, 7, 11 characters in it. And one thing you have to start, kind of getting inside of your head here is I wanted to try to make it easy on the user also. So right there, I also came in, and for the social security number, what did I do? Well, it's the first field, so I set autofocus, so it would be there to begin with. I put a placeholder in there, letting them know the kind of pattern that we're looking for. All right? I put a size in there, well, mainly because I tried to size everything pretty much the same. But what I should have done and didn't, max length, what should that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That should be 11. What you want to try to do on your end is idiot-proof your program as much as possible. And again, you know why it's called idiot-proofing? Because there's somebody who's going to go out there and is going to do something wrong, whether it's intentional or non-intentional. All right. Then it got to be a little hinkier. Now this one isn't bad, but I wanted to show you this because I'm gonna write this one twice to just kind of show you some of the stuff that's in here. All right. And why am I doing this? Well, you'll see in just a second. What I wrote here in line 140 and what I wrote here in line 141 are the same thing. All right. This says the pattern starts with any character. It must have between 2 and 25 of those, and ignore the case. That make sense? Again, begins with any alphabetic character, and there must be between 2 and 25 of them, Must, and, you know, and so that's the whole pattern, and it's case insensitive. If I didn't want to put the I in there for case insensitive, then I can list all the possibilities. When you do something like we see right here, A hyphen Z, or the one up here with 0, 9, that hyphen right there isn't looked at as a hyphen. That's just a range. So 0, that's the same, this right here is the same thing as if we wrote, which would also work. All right, but I don't know about you, but if it's up to me, I'll take that every time. All right. The reason I'm telling you that is in some of the later patterns, we allow for a hyphen. So you'll see the hyphen is out of. It's not in an A through Z, and it's not in a 1 through or 0 through 9 type of an idea. All right. If, for example, and I didn't mention this before, and I should have, I don't know if Social Security numbers can start with 0. I have no idea. Let's pretend for a second they can't. They must start with at least a 1, okay, for the first digit. Then all I have to do is change that from a 0 to a 1. Does that make sense? All right. What we're doing is we're setting up a pattern, and we're trying to take that pattern and we're trying to inflict it basically on the system. All right. You may or may not be aware of this, and again, when I ask this, I think sometimes you think I'm ragging on her. I'm not, but I don't know if Arinda showed you this last semester. You can set patterns up right in here. All right. You can set regular expression patterns up right in your HTML. You say pattern equal and you set it up. You can do that. But since what we're doing here is we're pretending that the user has turned off client-side validation so we can go through the server-side stuff, I didn't put any of that in there. But the point is, you can. All right? All right. Any questions on this one? Again, that's still pretty simple. So if that's easier, do it like that. If that's easier, do it like that. There's a lot of other ways that you can do it too. All right, I can't. I'd have to go look it up, but it's really ugly. But there's a pattern, believe it or not, for alpha only. So this right here. In fact, let me just put the line in there again. All right, and I'm going to copy it one more time. I don't know what I just did. All right, that's because I keep Control Z in my way into trouble. But another way you can do it, it's something like this. All right, and that's not the exact one, but it's something like that, which says alpha only. So you'd have to do that. Then at the end, you'd have to, again, if you wanted it 2 to 25 characters, you do something like that. The advantage of doing it that way, all right, is you don't have to put anything in here. That's saying only accept alpha. I can tell already that that's not right. There might only be one of these, and there might only be, I don't remember exactly what it was. But there's an alpha, I think it's alnum for alphanumeric, and there's several of these. All right? And if you say that's confusing, like I've said before, then just don't use it. All I'm trying to show you is there's multiple ways, always, of creating the same pattern. The last one, the last name, if we look in here, well, I'm looking and I can already see that I made a mistake. Because this will allow letters, lowercase or uppercase. This will allow hyphens. This will allow blank spaces. But I don't know if you remember or not, one thing I left off was an apostrophe. All right. What's that? No. If it's in here, all right, if it's in here like this, what we're doing, and now I get your question. Yes, but we'll fix it. All right. What this is doing right here is these are the allowable values. So it's lowercase letters, uppercase letters, blank space, apostrophe, and hyphen. To get to Travis's point, I think this is what he was asking. Now we'd have to put the whole thing in double quotes. So like I said, sometimes you end up having to use double quotes. It's out of necessity. It might not be that you want to or don't want to, but that's just the way that works. Yeah. you tell me if I'm answering your question, okay? You already saw that when we did this, that it screwed stuff up. But we can do this. You've seen that in other languages. By putting a backslash in front of it, you're escaping it. And you're saying, treat it as though it's just a single quote. All right, again, as we're walking through this, I'm just trying to show you there's a lot of different ways. Yes, go ahead. No, it's so easy to confuse the system with single and double quotes. I'd say in this language, probably the more than anything else, that's what you'll have problems with, is that. All right, here's another one. Again, I use the double quotes here, but now notice that the range went from 10 to 50. And this one right here is the address, so it can't have numbers. This one right here is the city, so it can't have numbers. Other than that, they look the same. And just these are all things that I was thinking about as I did this. All right, I'm not asking you this, I'm telling you this. Notice SSN pattern, first name pattern, last name pattern, address pattern, city pattern. I could have used one variable and just kept repeating it, but I chose to use separate variables just in case I wanted to go back and make changes later. But again, that's the kind of thing, different programmers have different points of view on that. Some people will say, no, you shouldn't have done all that stuff. Not only that, Jeff, you did really bad here because you set up all these variables, and that's all fine and dandy regardless of how you did it, but you really should have declared all of them up here, and that's true. I should have declared them all up there, and I should have set them equal, either set them equal up there, which I could have done, or set them equal to the empty string and then set them down below. All right. But again, another example, this being a very forgiving language, you can do a lot of different stuff almost any way you want to do it. Again, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Here's another one. There's the zip code. All right. Notice 0 through 9, 5 characters, and then in parentheses, which means what comes there, it's optional. All right, that's optional. So it says, if you want, you can have 5 numbers followed by a hyphen, followed by 4 numbers. Now notice that the hyphen there is not inside of here, because that would have said we could have had 4 hyphens. So it's all stuff you have to think about when you're creating this stuff. All right, and this says I can have 0 or 1 of those. That's what the question mark on the end means. No, that wasn't. That's a dollar sign. Forget I said that. That question mark. So if I use it, I can only have one of them. In other words, I can't have 53547-6004-6004. That won't work. That wouldn't be valid. And again, when you go look at the index.html file and you look down here at what I put, oh, it's because I'm using the wrong file down here. That's what's screwing this up. All right, but someplace down here where we had the stuff in here, this is a file from a different class. But when I set it up, all right, I tried to put inside of the placeholder text number NNNNN or NNNNN-NNNN. Always try to set it up for your user, and I'm going to expect that when you have your assignment. If you're creating a form, as much as possible, I don't care about validation on the client side, but I care about ease of use on the client side. I want you to make it easy for them to understand. Okay? All right. Username. This S here right there means basically any non-blank any non-blank character. 6 to 8 of any non-blank character. And when you say non-blank, we mean you can't hit the space bar, you can't hit the enter key, you can't hit the tab key, etc. All right. This one's kind of interesting. And down here I'm going to show you another example of that where that I did it twice. But right here, this is built into, what I'm showing you right there, that is built into PHP. That says, call the built-in PHP function called filtervar. Pass into it your email address. And what you're filtering is, make sure that that email address is valid. Now, when you do that, rather than you having to write a really long-winded pattern for validation, you're telling PHP to use its own pattern. All right, which is kind of nice. And again, how do you find out about that? I've told you this before. You know, you go out to php.net, and if I come in there under php.net up in my search and I type in filter var and hit enter, it's going to show me the different stuff that's available. And there are a lot of different options. You can filter so that to make sure, for example, you have an integer or a Boolean. All right, and there's a lot of other stuff that you can do with it too. And they've got a lot of examples in here. There's one for email. There's other ones that you can set up too, types of filters. All right, notice validation filters. All right, well, that's the Boolean. Let's see, sanitize filters. Sanitize email. What does that mean? That means if somebody puts an email address and they try to like slip some JavaScript in there and script tags or something like that, it'll strip them out. All right. Again, a lot of different stuff that's in here, okay? So again, what this is saying is check that email address against the built-in PHP filter var function tool using the email pattern, the acceptable email pattern. If it doesn't match, just tell them you must have a valid email address. All right. Then I did this one, and I've done it twice. This is the simple way, even though it's a little more code, and that's the harder way. Now, hopefully it doesn't bother you if I leave the comments in there, but just to show you this. All right, so there's two ways I validated the age. The first one I said, if it's not numeric. So if you want to check for something being numeric, it's is_numeric. What that literally means right there, the if part that's highlighted right there means, hey, if you put in something that's non-numeric. All right? Or if the age is less than that constant that we had before, and you notice that that constant, again, right now, that constant is not inside of single or double quotes. Or it's greater than that constant. So in English, what we're saying is, if you put in a non-numeric age, all right, or if you put in an age that was less than 1, or if you put in an age that's greater than 125. So if you did any of those, you broke it. And another way of doing it is this way. This is, again, using some built-in stuff, so to speak, and this is the other kind of an array that you can create. This example allowed me to show you this. All right, and what kind of an array is it? It's called an associative array, and we may have looked at those in JavaScript also, or Doug may have or may not have. I don't know if he did or not. But again, if I do this, just to show you again a simple example. So if I come through there and say this, $Midwest equals array. And then I come through here and I say $Midwest bracket bracket equals Wisconsin. And let's just put 3 of them in here. Illinois, and we'll put in Minnesota. All right. What that does, those lines of code, those lines of code that you see in there right now, is that creates an array. It's called Midwest, and it puts inside of $Midwest 0, it puts in Wisconsin. All right. $Midwest 1, it puts in Illinois, and $Midwest 2, it puts in Minnesota. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, that's your typical kind of array, but you don't have to do it like that. So I can set up an array, and when I'm doing it, I can basically set it up as an array that looks more like this one. This is an associative array, and what it says is that's the key, that's the value. So what I have in here is I've got a key that's called min range with a value of 1, and I've got a key that's called max range with a value of 125. Then I can use the filter validate int functions, because not only will it check to make sure that it's an int, but it will also make sure that that int falls between that range and that range. Does that make sense? Looks a little hinky when you look at it, but that's the way that it's set up. Literally, I went online and was looking at a bunch of different stuff for this. I found out a lot of stuff this weekend that I've never seen in a book before. And like, I don't even know, John, if you've ever seen this before. For example, you can go into a CSS file, take your CSS file, save it as a .php file, then put a special header type of thing on the top of your PHP file saying that that's really a CSS file, and then use it as though it's a CSS file. But inside of it, since it's a PHP, you can make PHP variables in the CSS file. I'd never seen anything. I'm sitting there reading this, and I looked up, and it was one of those, when I looked up, it was already 9 o'clock. You know, and it was, I started pretty early. You know. So again, this is just another way that you could do it. Yes? Yes. You don't have to even do them in order. So if I wanted them to be reversed, I can do it like this. And that'll create that, but just imagine that, you know, these were flipped. Yeah, you can do that. Sure. What do you mean, how would you apply that? Context, would you do it? Well, the question was, how would you do that? One way that you could do it, is I could sit there and I could put them all in like this, so they weren't in any kind of order. And I could put in all 50 states, as an example. Then I could go and run a sort routine. Then I could come back and I could renumber them based on that. See what I mean? All right, as an example. But quite often what you see is when you're doing this stuff, when you're setting up an array like this, all right, that you're going to see something more along the lines of this. And you'll have now that makes a lot more sense, because now when you're referencing the array like this, instead of saying Midwest 0, you say Midwest WI. And if you do that, and you use an associative array syntax like this, these keys, so let me just put the other ones in just so you see all of them. I know you know what the abbreviations are, but the reason that I'm showing it to you like this, again, not to waste my time, not to waste your time, let's get rid of these. And PHP could care less. You can put a blank space in there and there if that's easier for you to read. But now the way you'd refer to those would be WI, and you need the quotes in there, and IL, and MN. So with associative arrays, more often you see it with stuff like that. All right, because it's much easier. In other words, if I was creating a person array, I might want to call that height. I might want to call that weight. I might want to call that address or whatever, because it's much easier to reference the things inside of the array doing it that way. It's not that you have to do that. Some people are happy as heck to just use numeric arrays for everything. You can, but using the associative arrays can make your code a little bit easier, especially for people who are going to maintain your code. Yeah. Sure. Well, and going along with it, I think this is what you're getting to, so correct me if I'm wrong. But for example, when we're in the Objective-C part of the class, one of the things that we're going to learn is Objective-C has a type that's called type dictionary. That's how this is set up. You get a key and you get a value, just like in a dictionary. You get a term and you get the definition. I think that's what you're saying. Yeah, and that's quite often how this is used. But again, what this can do is this can make your code be a little more self-documenting like this. One thing that you're going to find, I've said this to you before, you know, if you get a job as a professional programmer, I think you're going to be amazed at the lack of documentation you're going to find in any code. Now, you might go to work for a company, and you might say, oh, Jeff, you don't know this company. They do great. Maybe they do. But most companies just don't. I literally would go thousands of lines inside a C code when I was at AT&T and not see a single comment. All right? Sometimes tens of thousands of lines. I mean, any comment, even, you know, saying what a variable is, saying whatever, just nothing. Variable names that sucked, you know, A, B, C, etc. And you're reading through it and you're trying to, you know, maybe if I get back to the beginning, somebody will have at least written a prologue explain. No, just nothing. They understood it, and I had to end up maintaining some of it. You know, try to find, and some of the people who wrote it weren't there anymore. And so what was this supposed to be? I don't know. I didn't put it in. Well, so and so did. Oh, they don't work here anymore. All right. And as I've said to you before, if you're going to do that, make sure that if you are going to do that, that you set it up and you document it when it's fresh in your mind. Well, I'll go back and do it later. No, you won't. And if you do, it'll suck. All right. Phone number, same kind of thing. Again, I set it up so that it was 3 digits, a hyphen, 3 digits, a hyphen, and 4 digits. And again, going back to what Zaina mentioned before, by putting the caret at the beginning and the dollar sign at the end, I'm assuring that that's the entire pattern. There's nothing else that's going to be allowed in there. All right. I played a lot with this birthday thing. I literally went out online and found one because it's like then it got even more complex. All right, because one of the things that's in there, if we go back up to the top here, is it asks your age and it asks your birth date. Technically, just so you know this, you know, if I'm asking you your birth date, I don't need to ask you your age. Isn't that true? Because I can just sit there and do a subtraction. Now, it might be more work. All right. The problem that you have with birth dates for people putting them in is, again, in different countries, people don't always use month, dash, slash, day, etc. So I tried a bunch of different things. And I went out online, and this is where I spent a lot of time was looking at this. And I want to show you this. This is a pattern that somebody had out there that they claim will handle almost any birth date. And it's pretty darn long when you get to the end of it. Now think of all they're trying to handle. They're trying to handle a month which either starts with a 0 or doesn't start with a 0. If it starts with a 1, it can be just a 1, or it can have a 0 or a 1 or a 2 after it. And if it has or any number between 2 and 9, right? So that's just month. Then with day, you have to handle all the stuff where January, March, etc. Those have 31, all right? Then everything else has 30, except the oddball, which is February, and then you have to try to handle leap years. This guy said that that'll handle everything, but when I put it in, it didn't work. But I left it in there anyway, just so you could see it. And again, I put the thing, it was from SitePoint. All right? And then I found this one, which I thought was kind of neat. All right? So what does this do? This asks you to put in a birth date. So let's say that my birth date was today. So I put in 09-22-2014. All right, so let's say I put that in. What this does is this says explode that, and that's the delimiter. So when I get done, that's going to create an array called BD. All right, and hopefully this just makes sense to you. $BD 0 is going to equal 09. $BD, whoops, $BD1 is going to equal 22. And $BD2 is going to equal 2014. And I found this one online. Again, I've shown you where it's from. All right. Technically, when you put them out there, yeah, they'll be in there as strings. All right. But then what I'm doing is I'm running a built-in PHP function that's called checkDate. And what it's going to do is it's going to make sure that that's valid for a month, which again means it can be 01, 02, 03, all the way through 09, or 10, or 11, or 12. But it won't handle 13, for example. It won't handle if you put a negative number in there. It won't handle that. All right. The nice thing about checkDate is checkDate also handles days, and it even handles leap years. All right. So I had to do a little bit more work at the front, but once I've done that, now you have to just say, hey, is what you put in there a valid date or not? And if it's valid, if it's not valid, put down invalid date. So again, I tried to come back, and everywhere I used something like this, I tried to come in here and let you know, there's the PHP manual for explode, all right, but there's runnable. And I just was looking online for all sorts of stuff, all right. And that's all of the validation. So once we get down to here, if we've screwed up at all, error string won't be empty. Neither will error array, but all I'm doing is checking that one. I could check either one. It doesn't really matter. So it says here are the errors that you found. And then I'm just printing out the error string. And notice that when I've been setting up these, I've been doing that. All right. And I've been doing that because if I don't, it's all going to print on the same line. Okay. And then I came down here and did this. I said, okay, if it hits else, everything worked. We're going to do this and we're going to take a break. But everything worked. So I'm going to just echo out a message. Remember, echo and print work the same way. But it's going to say all required and pattern matching checks worked. Here are the values you entered. And I just put a table in there and even put a border around it just so you could see it. All right, but what's different about it is this. Notice what I'm doing. I stopped writing PHP there and I started writing HTML. But when I get to my table data, what I'm saying is, hey, if there's a value in there for Social Security number, print it. But that value is in PHP format. So what I'm saying here is, I'm in PHP. I'm out of PHP. I want to get back into PHP again. I want to get out of PHP again. You understand what we're saying? And the reason I showed it to you like this is eventually going to change to something that looks like this. Which says if it's set, print it out. And what that will end up doing is when we fill out the form, if you screw it up, and you'll go right back to the form, and any values you put in will still be there. So if you had to fill out 12 things, and there were, 11 of them were correct, you shouldn't have to fill out those 11 again. All right. So we're going to do some pre-populating, and what you do when you do this, and you use isSet, and you use this, you create what's called a sticky form. All right. It's called sticky because it retains its value. The value sticks. All right. So we're going to get to that. But again, I wanted to show you this, and I kept it simple for now, but that's everything. All right. So we're going to take a break. Let's come back at 10 after 4, and I want to show you, I want to get the right HTML file and then run it for you and show you what it looks like. All right. So let's take a break.